Good afternoon and welcome to another News and Views. I'm your host, Don Burgess, and today we have with us the man who's not quite being asked to make bricks without straw, but might be seem like at times. The Finance Minister, Curtis Dickinson. Welcome.
Hey, Don. Good afternoon. Welcome, and good afternoon to your viewers.
Now you have to have one of the toughest jobs in Bermuda at the moment, and you seem to be doing okay. You've got the tie off today, a little bit more relaxed.
Well, Don, we're in the midst of budget season, and so while that can be an incredibly stressful time, we try to make sure that we stay comfortable while we're doing this typical.
Now you did get some good news this week. GenCom has repaid government the $11 million that the government had paid to the workers who were obviously needing it back in September. How will government move forward with GenCom with the redevelopment of the hotel at the Fairmont Southampton?
Well, Don, I'd like to think of it as kind of closing one chapter and starting another one. So we're glad that this matter has been resolved successfully. My understanding is that GenCom, as part of getting the money back to us, also raised additional capital to help them with their pre-development initiatives around Southampton Princess or Fairmont Southampton. Following the pre-development work, they will then need to start the redevelopment. And they are at this time out actively raising funds in support of the development exercise, which is going to be on the order, I think, of $200 million. And so they are out in the marketplace trying to raise money for that. As we have done before and will do in the future, there is an Investment Act that's currently on the books. And that act allows for the government to grant investors in hotels certain concessions. There are a range of concessions that are available to GenCom or any hotel operator. And my sense is that they will avail themselves of those concessions. Additionally, before this issue with the employees and before COVID, we had negotiated with them a form of a government guarantee in the order of about $50 million that would have been supported by the cash flows from the concessions that they would have received. That LOI has expired, and we will at some point re-engage them in a conversation around how we move forward together. But at the bare minimum, there is a range of concessions that are available to them relating to occupancy tax, customs duties, and land tax. And so I think they are very familiar with what the regime currently provides for, and we expect to hear from them in due course when they have made some progress on the capital raising front.
That sounds like a good step forward for us.
Yes.
I'd just like to remind our viewers, if you have any questions for the Finance Minister, you can please post them in the comments and we'll try to get to them. There's been a lot of talk about tax reform. When do you see meaningful tax reform taking place?
Well, tax reform is a subject that is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. We recently passed legislation, at least it passed in the Senate over the course of the last 2 or 3 weeks, which means that the statute is now on the books. And so we reconstituted the Tax Reform Commission. Actually, we reconstituted the legislation. The commissioners for the commission have not yet been selected or appointed. I am still giving thought to who those persons should be. And I'm also giving some thought to kind of the construct of the governance model around how the commission will do their work. I'm not quite finished that yet. Once we do, I'm in position to announce the names of the commissioners and the governance structure, we'll do so. We have the legislation calls for a report within 6 months. I think that is kind of aggressive, and so there may be a need to give some thought to extending the time period that the commission would be impaneled. Part of the work will be looking holistically at our tax system with the view towards whether or not the existing system is appropriate, and if not, then how do we reform it in a way that makes sense. So I see this work as not being kind of a 6-month or 1-year exercise. It's going to be a fairly lengthy exercise because tax reform is not just about changing a tax code, but it's also ensuring that we have the infrastructure in place to administer the tax code.
Right. I know a lot of people have been talking about income tax, which would be a bit more radical change from the way things were going, but possibly a lot more fair and equitable for those people in our society who are at the bottom end of the scale and need some help.
Well, I have not used the word income tax. What I've said is I want people to have a look at the existing system and to come back with a series of recommendations around what an appropriate system of taxation should be for us. Whether or not that includes an income tax, I don't know. I don't want to prejudge the work of the commission, but I do think that they need to explore any and all alternatives.
Which falls into our first question here. Alla Hamza wrote, is it completely out of the question to propose a small percentage tax on corporate profit?
Well, part of the reality is that Bermuda has in place for all exempted companies an arrangement. It's a piece of law that those companies will be exempted from corporate income tax until 2035. That's a matter of law, and so the successive governments of the day have committed to honoring that agreement, and so that is in place today, and so that is a construct that we would need to work through and get a full agreement from various stakeholders in the exempted company space if we were to move in that direction.
Okay. Now, you've done a lot of work on the budget. I imagine you're just fine tuning it at this point, but will there be any tax increases?
Clearly, you've never been through a budget process, Don. We keep making changes up until the night before the budget is presented. We're hopeful this year that we'll spare the wire by a couple of days, but we are neck deep in budget negotiations. That, quite candidly, I've shared my thinking with my cabinet colleagues, and we are working through the numbers now, trying to come up with the numbers that make sense. Okay.
So, getting back to my question, will there be any tax increases?
I have committed, I've stated publicly on a number of occasions. Actually, I've been on the video conference this morning with a number of stakeholder groups as we go through the pre-budget consultation process. And what I've said before, and I'll say it again, I have no plans to introduce new taxes or increase taxes this year.
Okay. So how do we go about making a budget that makes sense? Because everyone's still reeling from COVID. It seems like everyone wants no taxes, and they also want money from government to help sustain their businesses. So how do you pull off that magic act?
Well, COVID has had a profoundly negative impact on our economy, and we've actually seen 2 quarters of successive negative economic growth or shrinkage in GDP. So my own view is that introducing or adding additional taxes at this point in time would put additional brakes on the economy, hence no new taxes. If we can't look at tax, we have to look at strategies around how we grow the economy. Some of these strategies will be short-term, others will be longer-term. And then we have to take a hard look at cost. And so we are sharpening our pencils around cost, trying to identify areas where we can do things differently and better and more efficiently inside of government.
Okay. Now, you mentioned growing the economy. Where do you see Bermuda growing the economy?
Well, I think a couple of things. One, the impact of COVID on our economy has probably been less severe than it has been on other parts of the world. And so we are in a bit of a global shrinkage in the global economy. We have lost this year an entire tourism season. And so I would suspect that growth in our economic activity will come back from a resumption of normal activities, and then from a range of a whole bunch of other initiatives that the government is working on. For instance, we've said before, part of our plan for moving the economy forward is to do more of the things that we do right and to encourage those people who are here to bring more jobs here. That's one plank. 2, encourage and invite new industry. We're taking a hard look at medical tourism. We'll be introducing legislation over the course of the coming weeks and months around private family offices. We're trying to attract folks who have established their own family offices to manage their own money, to have them come here to Bermuda for subsistence purposes, but also to be a contributor to the economy. We're looking at initiatives in the vertical farming space, and then we're looking at some new ideas in the insurance space that I'm working with key stakeholders in the insurance industry on as a way of promoting existing products, existing capabilities.
How has the work from Bermuda Initiative helped so far, and do you see any growth in that for this next year?
Well, we've been encouraged by the number of folks who have taken the opportunity to move here and work remotely. It's a safe environment. It's a beautiful place to live and to work from. And we'll be encouraging folks to continue doing that, notwithstanding that we're now in an era when COVID vaccines have been introduced. and people may decide that there's less incentive to kind of move overseas. We think that this is still a great place to work with or without a pandemic, and we're hopeful that people will see the value in that. Additionally, you will have probably heard about a company called Affinity that has brought about 90 people here to work remotely, and they are in the process of converting their work from Bermuda permits, for lack of a better word, into proper work permits. Plans are for that business to grow. So we're encouraged and we're hopeful that more companies in the artificial intelligence technology space will see the value of being here in Bermuda.
Right. Now, was Infinity the one that was looking at maybe possibly 1,000 people? Or is that
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Right. We keep hearing about fintech. How much will fintech grow this next year?
I can't give you a prediction. I think, there has been a lot of energy expended on fintech, and we spent quite a bit of time building an infrastructure. And I'm hopeful that now that we have infrastructure in place from both a technology and a regulatory perspective, that we will find ourselves as a more attractive jurisdiction. Part of the challenge with fintech has revolved around the ability for those companies to actually get banking services. And to date, we don't have a solution for that.
Okay, we keep getting
banking solution. I think that there may be increased activity in that space.
Okay. Yeah, because we keep hearing like we're going to get a new bank to handle the fintech money and the casino money. Any word on when that might be?
I think those are initiatives that are actively underway, but I can tell you that setting up a bank takes some time, and unless there is an incumbent player who provides services to fintech banks who wants to base themselves here, it's going to be a little bit of time before we can get ourselves up and running.
Now, I know it's not good news to have the Fairmont Southampton down for this year, but it looks like the St. Regis is getting ready to start. They've been advertising for jobs. How much of will this help the recovery and help the economy grow?
I think it will be extraordinarily helpful, because what has ended up happening, in effect, is while one hotel was closing down, there's been a bit of a brief transition to a new one opening up. So hopefully that there will be a creation of jobs as a result of the St. Regis opening. My hope is that people will avail themselves to the opportunities that are currently available at that new hotel.
You mentioned earlier COVID being a factor that's had an impact, but what other factors which have had an impact on framing and composition of the 21-22 budget?
A couple, Don. We are a major player in the global economy, and so we don't have the luxury of ignoring those things that happen around us. There's a new administration in the United States. It wouldn't surprise me if there is a reversion to some of the policy decisions around tax that were being advanced by the Obama-Biden administration, by the now new Biden-Harris administration. Similarly, there are threats that come out of Europe through the OECD. There's an issue, something called the global corporate minimum tax, that we continue to work on. But it seems to me that the threats that are coming out of Europe are constant. The year before last, it was economic substance through the EU, which we successfully navigated, and we're working really hard with key stakeholders and the ministry team to work to try to figure out how we can navigate those threats successfully. Additionally, the budget will be framed in the context of where we are from a debt perspective. We have had successive years of deficits. We're predicting a $295 million deficit this year, largely as a result of the contraction in our revenue as a result of COVID and the unbudgeted spending in support of the health measures that we need to put into place in order to make sure Bermuda and Bermudians stay safe. So those things are other factors: deficits, debt, external factors, all play a part in how we go about framing the budget for next year.
I know, like, in speaking to your cabinet colleagues over the last couple of months, many of them don't predict a return to the normal, whatever the new normal is going to be, economy until 23 or 24. So how does planning this budget work into planning the next one, which is probably going to be also less revenue?
So we've set some goals. So when I went to the capital markets last August to refinance a bunch of our existing debt, I also took the opportunity to raise some additional money to tide us over, because I expected that there were going to probably be 2 to 3 years of deficits, because we had a hole to dig out of in light of the contraction that was caused by COVID. We're expecting on the order of $100+ million of a contraction in our revenue number. And we're planning to spend about $125 million this year on COVID-related matters. So all told, between $250 to $300 million of unexpected spending. In order to come back from that, as much as I would like to be able to kind of snap my finger and get us back to balanced budget tomorrow, I've done something more realistic and kind of plotted a path for us to get back to balanced budget over 3 years. And so what I'm expecting is that the proceeds from the debt offering will be used to kind of fund deficits as time goes on, with us turning cash flow positive or balanced budget in 2023, 2024. Normal, I'm not sure what that means anymore. We're hoping that tourism will return to its 1920 levels in 2022, 2023, leading to a year in 2023, 24 of increased activity and potential for a balanced budget.
How much of the national debt factor into doing considerations, or how much of a handicap it is to have as much debt as we have?
It is a major consideration in the development of the budget. I've spoken publicly before about my concern around our debt ratings. The debt ratings today are very good. A potential downgrade could have a catastrophic effect on our economy, because it would negatively impact key participants in the economy, the international business sector and banks, which could lead to higher costs for us, one, in terms of our borrowing costs, but it could also lead to higher costs for the international business sector and the local banks in terms of their cost of capital.
I know we've been able to parlay remote working into a positive for it, but it also could be a negative where people don't need to necessarily be here to do some of the jobs in the economy. Is that any sort of factor or risk?
That is a risk, somewhat mitigated by the fact that we do have an economic substance regime in place. And so the work that we did in 1819 and 1920 around economic substance makes it a bit of a requirement for certain companies to have their mind and management located here in Bermuda. And so it is a risk, one that we're trying our best to manage, making sure that Bermuda remains an attractive place for people to live and work.
You mentioned a little bit about cost savings. So what sort of cost savings and debt reduction measures are being considered?
Well, we're looking across all lines on the income statement. And so it looks at employee costs. We have a number of positions that are vacant, and we're planning not to fill a number of them. We're looking at things like travel and stationery, everything. Everything is fair to be considered. Anything
other than those ones?
So, and it's a matter of kind of us taking a look at all the things that we do and developing priorities around things that we can do and things that we need to do and things that we want to do. And the things that are required have to be first priority. And some of the things that are nice to have, we have to give second consideration to them in light of the fact that we do have some cost constraints.
Now, last year with COVID, we had government having people allowing to not pay their pension or social insurance for a year. That's going to expire in July. Is that something that's going to be on the table again this year?
Well, we are working actively with our union partners around ways of solving the fiscal constraints that we have in place. Some of these programs will expire in July, I think, and then others in August, and then another one in November. And so we are not planning on austerity measures in the same form that we currently have in place. One of the unintended consequences of the current construct is employees took a 10% cut in their pay, offset by reductions in the benefits. The longer term implications of employees not contributing to either social insurance or their pension funds, at least the government employees, means that we exacerbate the problem with respect to the underfunded nature of both the Social Insurance Fund and the Public Service Superannuation Fund. So what I don't want to do is solve one problem and then create another one that's potentially larger. So these agreements will expire, and we are working with the unions around ways of collaborating on measures that can bring increased efficiency and productivity into the public service.
Okay. Now, what sort of impact has Caroline Bay had on the budget and our economy as a whole?
Well, I think there are two in particular. One is we have had to borrow $200 million in support of that project. The bulk of the money was used to repay the lenders to the transaction. That was about $170 or $180 million. We've also had to pay the interest cost on those borrowings. And then we've also had to pay for the cost of lawyers and financial advisors to help us extricate ourselves from this arrangement. So we're basically working to get our money back or get possession of the property. So in a sense, it has taken money away from my ability to, if I needed to, borrow in support of other Bermuda projects. And then there's the interest cost. But we are working on this hard, and there is a way forward. It's just going to take a little bit of time.
When you say there's going to be a way forward, does that mean somebody else taking over the property and continuing the development, or for some other use?
I have said from the very beginning with respect to this situation, Don, that my primary concern was the government getting its money back. And so I'll have to consider all options to get that money back.
Now, as we get ready to wrap up here, because I know you've got another meeting at 4:45, and what would you tell Bermudians ahead of the budget of how this is going to impact them?
We are crafting a budget that we think is going to be sensitive to our times, but also sensitive to the needs of the people of Bermuda. Budgets are a bunch of numbers, but those numbers are intended to and inevitably will impact the people who live in Bermuda. And so we're taking a very sensitive approach to solving the problems while also being focused on delivering services that people of Bermuda would expect from us.
And give you a chance to have the last word or last day before we sign off, and let you tighten up and roll up your sleeves back again to work on this problem.
I'm sorry, Don, I missed that.
Sorry, give you a chance for a last word before you get back to work and roll up your sleeves to fine tune the budget or make changes as the case may be.
Well, I think, what I would like to do is I'd like to thank the people of Bermuda for their cooperation and their support, especially over the course of the last 12 months as we've navigated our way through this pandemic. Bermuda has stood herself well, largely the result of the people of Bermuda taking this pandemic very seriously and working to follow the rules put in place by the government. I will tell you that in as much as we've been able to manage the number of cases on island and keep the numbers relatively low, we have been able to avoid an economic Armageddon. And for that, I thank the people of Bermuda.
And Minister, we thank you for your time. We know we've got busy weeks ahead of you. And for our viewers, we always thank you for tuning in and watching, and hopefully you learned a little bit, and there won't be any real surprises for you. Come with the 27th?
The 26th. It's Friday the 26th.
26th. Right. Thank you again, Curtis Dickinson, Mr. Finance Minister. And for us here at Burn News, as always, have a beautiful afternoon.